Okay.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation on gambling awareness. Just before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation as our traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for joining us. My name is Una and I'm from the Irish Support Agency, and we're joined today by Nipunika from the Multicultural New South Wales Problem Gambling Service. Nipunika is a clinical consultant, and we're also joined by Katrina, our outreach worker with the Irish Support Agency. So we have a presentation, and Nipunika, I would love to hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you sharing this information, these insights into problem gambling, and we look forward to the presentation. So I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Una and Catherine. Thank you for having me today. I would like to talk about a little bit about gambling and how it impacts the individual as well as the community. So the heading I thought was of putting was however rare a four-leaf clover is, winning from gambling is rarer. Um, so we, because the reason I use this is because being from the Irish background, we know that cloverleaf is something everybody's not familiar with, and that the four leaf is something supposed to be lucky, while winning from gambling is something very, very rare when you compare the two. Um, so gambling is, as you might know, it's something which is there in throughout the world. In some countries, it's legalized, and in some countries, it's not legalized. But gambling does prevail one way or the other in most of the countries. In Australia itself, we too spend about um, $18 billion in gambling. And the interesting thing is when you look at the number of people that are in the country and with the amount of money you spend, we able to derive what you call the biggest, we're able to derive gambling losses per country, per individual. And that shows that in Australia, we spend about $960 in gambling, and while US does spend about $117 billion in gambling, it's a lot lower when when per individual. And I also would like to point out, because we are talking with more of the Irish community in Ireland, it's the amount they spend on gambling is also high, which is close to about 600. It's a little bit less than 600, but close to about 600. So when you look at the two communities that we are talking about, Australia and people from the Irish background, both countries do have gambling in in sort of like in part of their life, one way or the other. So the other thing I like to just point out, just because somebody gambles, that doesn't mean you have a problem gambling. But according to the WHO research, there is like about 350 million people each year shows that they do have problematic gambling. So these are the people who not necessarily would have started as problematic gambling, but because over the years they would be turning into problematic gambling. As I said, gambling is more of a silent addiction when you compare with other addictions in the we know about. With drug and alcohol, we hear a lot about it, but with gambling, we don't hear that much. So in Australia itself, we spend about $12 billion in electronic gaming machines. When you look at that number with the, the amount of money you spend on substance use, which is like about $12 billion. but um, we hear a lot about substance abuse and as an addiction, but we don't hear about gambling, which is like about 25 billion. This is partly because visually, person with gambling problems cannot be identified, while a person with substance use could be more easily identified. So when I was told to look into to give this presentation, I looked into how does it in Ireland. So I could see a lot of talk, a lot of discussions currently in existence about gambling in Ireland. W- just like any other countries like Australia, even in Ireland, gambling has increased during the pandemic. And even among young children, gambling has become a problem. So again, it just shows that both countries, this is an issue that needs to be talked about, discussed, and understood. So what is gambling? I mean, we hear a lot about gambling. What is exactly gambling? So in order to identify gambling, there has to be exchange of money or something of a value. So you would with the intention of making more money or increasing wealth, or that is one of the characteristics of gambling. In the second characteristics is you bid on something of unknown, of an event that happens in the future. You don't bid on something which you know. The third one is it's a game of chance. That's what gambling differentiate between a soccer match or something, where a soccer match composed of skill, while in gambling, especially with electronic gaming machines where you have to just push a button, there's no skill involved. So those three characteristics makes a gambling. What are types of gambling? And I'm sure we all once in a while would have gone and got lottery ticket or instant scratches. So those are the very common ones, but those are not the problematic ones. People don't get addicted to lotteries or instant scratches. Sports bets is where you bet on sports events, whether it's horse racing or car racing or anything as such. Electronic gaming machines, or in Australia we call it pokies. Those are the machines which you will see in clubs or in pubs. Those are the machines which are very colorful, attractive, but those are the ones which we find most people find it difficult to work with and form into addiction with poker machines. Casinos, table games like blackjack, roulette, those are usually um, in Australia, mostly in certain clubs or in casinos, while online gambling is the other emerging sport, which is on esports or fantasy sports. So with online gambling and esports, I would say esports is when people put bets on video game competitions. So video games is something quite popular nowadays among young people, or even and people would bet um, on these online esports competitions. Fantasy sports is where when um, people do form fantasy groups of games, and then they would bet on those. With something what I like to talk about a little more detail is about online gambling, because online gambling is something which is prevalent nowadays, and in looking into the future, it's this is the area that is going to be more problematic. More and more young people would be accessing online gambling. The danger with online gambling is that you could access it at any time, 24 hours. That's one thing. The second thing is nobody would know actually you are engaging with online form of gambling. It's very easy to hide. If someone is going to a venue, then you're more likely someone else, a family member or a friend might be able to see and would say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you going to the club so often? But with online gambling, that doesn't happen, while you're working, while you're studying, you can engage in online gambling. The second point I like to say with online gaming and online gambling is that even children can easily take part in online gambling because they don't ask for an ID. Even if they do ask, they can easily provide a fake ID. The third danger with online gambling is that because you do put a lot of your personal information, personal identity theft is quite common with online gaming and online gambling.
Mm-hmm. Nipunika, I must say, since I moved to Australia about 10 years ago, I have never before seen such access to gambling in a country as I have over here, in terms of pokie machines being in every pub, the amount of casinos that are around. But as you say, online gambling is so prevalent over here, and you see so many TV advertisements, and it's almost as if they're trying to lure people to use their services, which I'm sure they are. But I'm very surprised that there isn't more government constraints against online gambling services, and there isn't more restrictions around that, because it's just so easy access. As you said, children can get on there. That to me seems very dangerous. I'm surprised that there isn't more legislation to protect people from becoming addicted to online gambling.
Yeah, I do hear there are some new regulations that are going to come into place. It's a work in progress at this point of time.
Okay. Okay.
So, what's a general perception about gambling? Usually people think it's fun and it's fun. It's something to do, you go and have a beer and then you just play with the poker machines or something like that. It relaxes for some people. Some people have this view that by playing or taking part in gambling, it's a way of getting quick money. Some people feel like without having to work for days and days, months, I might be able to earn some more money, or I'm in need of something, so this is a quick way of getting some money. Other people think it's harmless, I'm not doing any harm. um, harm then but from the other point of view is it's gambling, you tend to lose money, because most of these venues do operate for the profit. It's not there for the person who's playing to make money. It's not a charitable organizations, so you will likely 99% of the time you're likely to lose money than to gain money. And it's very easy to become into a problematic behavior. One of the very interesting things about gambling and its gambling venues is that sometimes I like to talk and tell most of my participants is that if are you aware when you go into any of these venues, there are no clocks. Okay, I do know that nowadays everybody has a wristwatch or smartphone that they can access the time, but the whole idea of not having a phone, a clock, is that people don't these venues, they don't want you to realize the time is passing by. So the more time you spend, more money they earn, so they do have make it in sort of like a fun environment, but there are consequences. There are very strong negative impact of this fun environment, so called fun. So some of the things people say is that, oh, going to the pub or going into and gambling is very Australian. That's a misconception. Not everyone goes in, but that's how it's been portrayed, that it's a Australian culture. And sometimes people do feel that in order to be part of this culture, especially coming from a different country, going to one of these venues and gambling is a way to be part of the Australian culture. When does fun gambling changes from fun to problematic? It depends. If you can just go once a year and spend $5 and come back, then it would be fun. But if you continue to go and gamble, the frequency, if it if it changes from a monthly activity to a weekly, from a weekly to daily, the frequency, then that's where it changes from a fun to a bit problematic. The amount of time or the money you spend, if you keep on spending more money than what you can afford to lose, then it changes from fun to being problematic. Again, if you think that you are going there for half an hour but you spend whole night, then it changes again from fun back to problematic. Chasing losses is one of the very with gambling very strong factor with gambling is chasing losses, because what happens is quite often people feel like they have lost a certain amount of money, they need to gain that money, and they think that by spending another $5 or $6 they can gain that money, so they start chasing their losses. And once again, I like to just to reiterate that those venues are there to make the venue profit, to make for them a profit-making organizations, not for the person who is putting those money for them to make money. So trying to, if you have lost money and you're thinking you can win back, that's a very far-fetched idea. Hiding or lying about gambling. So if you once in a while you go to one of these venues and you tell your friends and I'm going to the club and then it's for fun then. But if you are hiding, if you're not telling your partner, family members about your gambling activity, that is a sign of problematic.
Nipunika, while I have you, it's Katrina here. One thing that I've noticed in the past for people that have had problems with gambling is they often talk about how much they have won. So they may speak to friends or in a social circle that they've maybe won $500, but they rarely mention the losses and how big they can be sometimes. Because a lot of the Irish community out here may live with friends and not family members at home, where it may be easier to pick up if there's a problem. How would you advise friends or housemates to raise the topic of problem gambling if they've got concerns that what used to be fun for the person has now become problematic?
Yeah, so Catherine, that's a good question. Whether it's family members or friends, if someone is aware of someone they they live with or they care about is spending money more than they can afford at one of these venues, they could raise the question with them. Um, they might notice things like, for example, if they notice this person is earning a lot, earning sufficient, but the person doesn't have any money with them, that then that's a red flag. Where did the money go? And if the person is not engaging in the normal activities they would have been doing with the friends, um, they no longer play footy or something, but they're just constantly avoiding them, that's another sign that that they could raise. If they're always asking for money, those are signs, that mm, where somebody could think, oh, what's wrong, where can we um, and There would be a lot of reasons why somebody would be engaging in gambling, for a number of reasons. Just having a conversation saying, look, this is not something to be something um, could there's a lot of help there is available. You could talk to a counselor if if you don't feel like talking to a friend, and we can get some professional help, so that you know that way you will get the mm, sufficient not sufficient you will get the necessary support to
Mm.
to put back your life in track, without blaming, without pointing fingers, in a very non-judgmental way. If you could have that conversation, that's a way I think friends could help one another.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
So with gambling, there is a lot of misconceptions. Quite often, sometimes people think that there are a lot of things happening in this universe. A lot of things are not going my way. By gambling, getting this money, getting this is a way of the universe putting things back into perspective. Um, the other people feel like they have superstitious belief. They feel like, oh, today I'm wore my red lucky shirt without noticing, I'm sure to win. Other people feel like, okay, there is a system. um so many days I lost, today is my day. Or in a poker machine, I notice that this is the pattern, and now I will win. Going back to poker machines, um, poker machines operate on a what you call a random generated numbers. So it's like a waterfall of numbers, and those numbers just correlate with a picture. And the interesting thing a lot of people don't realize is those numbers continue to work even when the machine is not working. So even though they feel like there is a system, the system is not actually, they are not seeing the real system, because they only see the system when it's working, when they only push the button, but the numbers would be so it's near impossible for them to actually come up with a system. The other misconception a lot of people with gambling problem have is what you call a selective recalls. So they in selective recall, like what you said, a lot of people do talk about their winnings. They don't talk about their losses. Okay, they remember even the small amount, even the $5 they won, but they don't remember they have lost $500. Okay, because one of the things is when you win, there's the excitement, and even with the machines there will be the sound, the lights, so it goes into your brain that, oh, this is a pleasant, something pleasant, so you remember the pleasant things and you forget about the not so pleasant things. So that's what you call selective recall. The other misconception is what they call a near misbelief, and that's where when people feel like, oh, I nearly won. The line was just there. Or if I played 1 second earlier, 1 second later, I would have won. But in gambling, there is nothing called near miss. If you miss, you miss. If you lose money, you lose money. So there is nothing called near miss. You lost money. Chasing losses, which we talked about earlier, is another misconception. They feel like, okay, next $5 I will win. Gambling is an addiction, just like any other addiction, um, uh, like dependence on substances, or it is an addiction. And according to DSM-5, it's been classified according to the DSM-5, it's been classified as an addiction. So which is good, because it helps the clinicians and for us to identify and provide the right treatment. Um, because with just like any other addiction, with it affects the same part of the brain, and it also when you will likely to see withdrawal symptoms. There will not be so much like a physical withdrawal symptoms, but there is withdrawal symptoms, and the urge and the cravings to gamble, just like for any other addiction. Gambling and comorbidity. So, gambling is closely associated with alcohol. Um, uh, it could be partly because alcohol could initiate gambling, and gambling could, or the vice versa, because of gambling addiction, will be dependent on alcohol as well as substance use. Anxiety and depressions are also mental health issues that are quite prevalent with gambling addiction. Again, it could be because of mental health, some of these mental health issues, or an individual more likely to gamble, or because of gambling, might be experiencing anxiety and depression. So, as I said earlier, gambling and alcohol is quite closely related. One of the things is most of the venues that have gambling machines or gambling um, places do provide alcohol, and as a result, people are more likely to drink more. The more you drink, the more likely to spend money because they are more likely to be aware of the things that are happening around you. They tend to stay more longer than what they intend to, and also show behavior that may have a negative consequences as a result of drinking um, and gambling. How does gambling impact an individual? Of course, it does impact individual from a financial point of view. um, you tend to lose money. You are more likely to spend all your earnings on gambling. It does impact your work or studies, because more likely to be thinking about gambling. How am I going to gamble? When am I going to gamble? Rather than focusing on your career or on your studies. Health, it does get impacted because, again, less likely to be physically active as a result of gambling. You're more likely to be sitting in one place and taking part in gambling activities. Gambling does impact the family and friends. We usually say that for every person with a problematic gambling, about 10 people are being affected. It could be your family, it could be your friends, colleagues. Gambling also lead to criminal activities because as a result of gambling, you lose money and come up, then you have debt collectors knocking at your door and you're being cornered. You have no way to say, and more likely to engage in criminal activities. It does, gambling does affect, as I mentioned earlier, your mental health, or mental health could be affected. Mental health could result in gambling. So, what are some of the risks and protective factors for gambling? So the risks would be, one of quite often we have seen is initial win. So if someone initially wins when they go and gamble for the first time, then that becomes a factor for them to feel. They feel that they will be able to win again. They will be able to do this again in some other time, and with initial win and that's one of the reasons I would like to say this. There are some of the online games, gambling games that do not use money, but that stimulate more like an actual casino or actual gambling machines. And in those games, what they do is they do allow people to win. And when they do win it, it's a way of promoting people to feel like, okay, they feel confident, I can do with real money. And then they start playing with real money. So so initial win, whether it's with actual money or pseudo money, is a risk for having problematic gambling. we have talked about chasing after lust, so I'm not going to talk about it, but that's also another risk. Comorbidity, whether it's substance use or whether it's mental health, is another risk for problematic gambling. Parental influence. We all know that we look up to parents. We get a lot of cues about our own life from them, and if there is a parent with problematic gambling, there's a strong tendency for children to have problematic gambling in the future. Post-trauma stress disorder is another risk for problematic gambling. Those are the risks, but that doesn't mean that there are no protective factors. There are some other protective factors could prevent somebody even with these predispositions to prevent someone from becoming problematic gambling. So that is positive relationships, whether it's a family member, friends, or someone. If there is, then that is a positive protective factor. Social support, if you have a strong social network, then that's another protective factor. Interest and hobbies. um, if one tend to continue with the interest and hobbies, then there is less time to spend on gambling because you do have you want to make sure your interests and hobbies are being met. Physical health and mental health is very important. And if you do have good physical health, then that's a protective factor from becoming into problematic gambling. So, with Multicultural Problem Gambling Service for New South Wales, we do provide support. We provide support in number of ways. We provide support from counseling and support, financial counseling, multi-venue self-exclusions, and community education programs. Um, with counseling, it could be face to face, it could be over the phone, it could be through online. Um, and because we are a service provider for the whole of New South Wales, it doesn't matter where you are, we can support you. And it doesn't matter what your visa status is, or we do provide support to anyone. It doesn't matter, irrespective of your visa status. We do provide counseling, um, and support.
That's fantastic.
So that's not a deterrent for somebody to contact us and say, look, I do have a problem. Can I get some support? Whatever. We don't ask for the visa status, and um, we are there to help anyone.
And Medicare isn't a requirement either. Okay. Is,
Sorry?
is Medicare a requirement?
No, no, we don't ask for the Medicare. So if they don't have a Medicare, that's fine.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. So we do also have a financial counselor, and we do provide financial counseling. So with financial counseling, what the clinician would be doing will be talking to their banks, or to see if they can get a moratorium on their loans. And they might sometimes we might work with the state debt recovery to get some sort of assistance. We do not provide any physical financial support, but we can work with the agencies that they have a relationship and work to support them.
That's great. Is that service free of charge, Nipunika?
Yes, all our services are free of charge.
Great.
Yeah, just at this point, I think that's really important for me to mention that from the perspective of the Irish Support Agency, if someone is struggling with a gambling addiction and they're seeking assistance, we don't want anyone in the community to be suffering and maybe not being able to have a hot dinner or things like that. We would really appreciate if people come to us. It's a confidential service as well. And we are understanding of these addictions. We just want open and honesty. And look, we're happy to do a financial assessment. If we can assist in any way, that's what we're here for.
So we do also provide multi-venue self-exclusions. So multi-venue self-exclusions is so that the person does not person exclude himself or herself from a venue that they generally go and gamble. It could be for a period of minimum is 6 months, the maximum is 48 months. Um, the individual can choose between the entire venue or certain areas, just the gaming room or all the gaming activities. So basically the responsibility, we want the individual to take the responsibility to take the initiative, but we will support in getting the multi-venue self-exclusion. So it prevents somebody from getting the urge or the craving to gamble because the venue is there. As I said, there are some new legislatures are being put in place. We don't know when they will come. Some of them is that so even a family member or a could um, could intervene and get a multi-venue self-exclusion ban, cashless gambling, so that the amount um, so that there is a fixed amount that they could gamble, um, and also even the venues to be um, to be imposing a high penalty if they don't do the right thing. And finally, facial recognition, so that if somebody is being identified and have already got a multi-venue self-exclusion, then there is a facial recognition that could assist them ensuring that the multi-venue self-exclusion is in place.
That's really interesting, Nipunika, around the third party. Do you have any more information on that at this point about how family members may seek that? Do they go to an organization like yourselves, or is there a particular process set up yet?
Not yet. This is just in the this has not come into the. This has just been discussed in the parliament, so we are hoping that it will be passed. That this will be the new legislation. Of course, there's a lot of legal matters that they need to and different aspects they need to look into before they legalize it. So, for it to be passed as a law. So right now we are waiting for it. So it's only right now only the individual themselves can take a multi-venue self-exclusion.
I guess like other addictions, Nipunika, if the individual does that themselves, that is maybe a sign that they're willing to try and put a stop to their problem gambling and get a hold of it, as opposed to if a family member takes that stance, the individual may not be so willing.
Yes, so with just like any other addiction, um, if the individual take that if the individual take the first step, then it's more likely to succeed. And one of the things with counseling and with what we would tell is that even if somebody can abstain for a short period, that is a success. It's sometimes people feel like, okay, I did very well for a couple of months and I went and played, and we'll discuss again, we'll see what else can be put in place. So just because one failure doesn't mean that you need to continue to gamble. If you did by mistake go and gamble, that's okay. Let's talk, let's put things in place, so that it doesn't happen in again and again you know
And Nipunika, I suppose a lot of gambling behaviours are associated with social outlets, whether that's going to the pub and playing the pokies or going for a day out at the races. What would you say to anyone who has identified that they do have an issue with gambling, but they're afraid that if they self exclude or if they abstain from going to certain social outlets, that they would miss out on that social activity, and they're not, they would be maybe afraid of how that would maybe isolate them or leave them a little bit, lacking of friendships.
Yeah, and that's when I would say to the individual to look into the frequency of going and gambling. the amount of you can afford to. So it becomes very individual. The individual person will have to look into how much am I spending, can I afford to, does it become a problematic that I don't have I don't have enough funds to support me for the next couple of weeks or days or things like that. Do I have to keep on increasing the amount of money I spend at the time I spend in this venue in order to get the same level of excitement? Those are things that I would say, think about those things. And get those, if you have those answers, then you need to re-evaluate whether the fun of you getting out of being part of the group is um, is value, like when you compare to having not having funds to support you for the next week or 2 weeks.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so there is no specific answer saying, okay, you can only spend X amount. It all depends upon the individual, the circumstances, and how and the frequency.
yeah. Hmm.
So and that's why talking to someone and saying, look, I think I have a problem, um, what can I do? So then we would say, okay, maybe try to minimize, go once a 3 months, have a budget, you know, take only $50, if that's what you can afford, only $50. You lose that $50, you gain that $50, you
Hmm.
come out, we can talk and come put things in place so that you don't lose out on your friends and socializing as a result of uh,
Okay. All right, well, that was really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing those insights with us. And I think gambling is a huge problem. And I think the more awareness we can bring to the supports out there, the better. It's a great service that you guys offer. There's plenty of resources there. Someone will always be on the end of a phone to chat to if people need. So I'll share all of your information or all of the information around the problem gambling service, any links that people can access to reach your services. So on behalf of the Irish Support Agency, we really appreciate you working with us on this, and hopefully it'll be able to help some people out there.
Yes, I do hope so. So I said, our we are a free service, and we do provide. We work Monday to Friday, and our phone is 1-800-856-800. So anyone can call us, and we'll try our best to support them in their. mm, Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.